9/28/2017. We just arrived in Kuwait. We finally got told our mission would be to Syria to provide security and resupplies to the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, and the ODA teams out fighting ISIS. This is the most kinetic mission that 2-7 has at this time. Until now, we were unsure where our deployment would actually be between Kuwait, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. After a year of training, we finally get to leave the wire and hopefully waste some terrorists. Your mother thinks that I'm staying safe in Kuwait, building a new forward operating base, and that I won't have much cell service or internet access. I'm not in the habit of lying to her, but I don't want her to be stressing out over me while she's pregnant. The truth is, I selfishly am stoked to face some real danger and use my skills. We were supposed to have a few days here to train and get mission briefs and just get ready, but we learned today that we are leaving tonight for Shadadi, Syria, on Ospreys. Apparently the infill is a few hours flight time and a fairly unreliable bird over enemy terrain. We may have to conduct 2 air refuelings, which I've heard sucks a lot. Also something that we haven't trained for. What could go wrong? 9/29/17, Shadadi, Syria. After a few hours in the air, the pilot maneuvered around sharply. That was unusual. I knew we had to be close, but that also meant we were definitely over ISIS territory. I dropped my night vision down to see what the door gunner was doing. I remember the back door gunner looking around frantic, bracing himself as if we were being attacked from the ground. All of a sudden, heavy sand and dust swept into the cabin from the back hatch. The pilot tried to lift us out, but we were completely engulfed in sand, so I braced for impact as we fell from the sky. Our bird hit the ground hard and began to roll over. Then I heard the most awful and unusual sound of twisted metal and earth colliding, rotors still spinning and hitting the ground with each deadly rotation. As we crashed through the wall, the gunner was thrown around like a rag doll in the cabin. Through the windows, all I could see was fiery red and orange blaze, the intense light glowing and shimmering off the dust and sand in the air. It was mesmerizing, but it was also blinding. For a moment, the whole world slowed down to a near halt. We were all stunned for a few seconds before we realized what had actually happened. Holy crap, this is really happening right now. We just like the stories and the movies. We didn't practice this. Why hadn't we trained for this? I thought ISIS had just shot us out of the sky with an RPG. I thought we would all die for sure, trapped in a tin can inferno. I saw my life flash before my eyes. These sons of... My thoughts raced as I imagined you and your mother and her explaining and her telling you what sort of man I was. It was a surreal feeling, to say the least. For about 5 seconds, I couldn't move. I'm sure I didn't breathe. It felt like 5 minutes. Then I snapped back to reality when I heard yelling, "Move, move, get the heck out. This bird is about to blow." I struggled to get my buckle off as I was getting pushed from the men to my left. I finally broke free from my buckle and ran out the back hatch of the down Osprey, choking on fumes and sucking in sand, looking around for my rifle and my teammate Pilar. I figured there would be a crew of ISIS ready to put up a fight as we got off the bird. That's when it really hit me that I didn't have my rifle. It was pinned under my sniper gear, and my night vision had been ripped off in the chaos. The blaze lit up the sky around us like Times Square. There was a very little light pollution in the Middle East at night, so anyone within miles could probably see our glow. We didn't know where exactly we were, so we struggled to get some half-assed security and accountability. There were still guys running in and out of the fiery helo, looking for lost gear and men. The guy in front of me was tangled in sea wire and losing his mind trying to get out. I grabbed it to help him escape, not really knowing what it was without my night vision. The sea wire shredded my hands. We finally made it out and walked around for a bit stunned. When the chaos slowed and everyone grew quiet, there was a voice yelling at us. It was an American. What a relief. We were just outside our fire base and had crashed through the perimeter security wall on our way down. The Marine on post was just as astonished as we were, and he was yelling at us to see if anyone was hurt. I don't have to fend off ISIS without a weapon. That's pretty awesome. Once we realized everyone was out safe, we watched in awe as the rest of the Osprey went completely up in flames. The light was brilliant against the darkness. It sounded like firework display as munitions were cooking off. The other bird landed safely and had picked up their security. Every man was accounted for. The door gunner had fractured pelvis and some major bumps and bruises, but no one was critically injured or killed. You really just don't ever know when it's your turn or your day to die, and frankly, it's out of your hands. I feel blessed to be alive because you watch enough news, you understand that people don't survive that stuff. Our lives are spared tonight by the grace of God, no doubt about that. Before our debrief, I slipped away to a quiet spot, and for the first time since I was a child, I cried big, ugly tears, real, raw emotion. I was so glad to be alive, to get a chance to be a husband and a father. I couldn't control it. It feels strange to barely escape death. It means more when you have more on the line. My responsibility to raise you hung in the balance of that bird. The pity party didn't last long, though. Time to take some deep breaths and buck up, because now I'm in Syria, and I have to try to not dwell on the crash. We still have a mission to accomplish, and I'm the leader of my team. They are counting on me to make decisions. ISIS hates our guts. They have been training and preparing to kill us since they were kids, and I can't afford to slip up. What an entrance. We are leaving this base in a few days to the front lines to hold security for the Advise and Assist Green Beret teams. We got to get our shit together. Okay. I didn't really have a exit plan to that thing, but
I think a lot of the kids are wondering about your helicopter crash. I don't know how much you talk about it in class. I know that they bring it up to me sometimes, and I always tell them that they have to talk to you. But what kind of drew you to the place where you wanted to tell it in this way?
To be honest, I'm not sure. What happened was I have a reminder on my phone that pops up every year. It kind of helps me not just get through the feeling. I remember the feeling of it, and I remember vividly, all of the sounds and the chaos of it that ensued. But it helps me to, when I remember it and go through it and read it and all that, it just helps me to feel blessed more so than feel sorry for myself. And so sometimes I just need that reminder of, hey, this bad thing happened, but it was ultimately a good thing that, you're still alive. You get to be in front of these students. You get to be, get the opportunity to share your story and have a testimony. And so I just wanted to kind of share that as bad things happen a lot to a lot of people. And it's just kind of the way, the perspective that we, look at it from can change, and we can be positive about it, or we can be victims about it. And I'm just choosing to not be a victim. So there's guys who were in that crash that I know every year they have a pity party for themselves. And, they probably want some people to feel bad for them. And I don't. I just want people to understand that there's different perspectives of looking at things.
It's kind of a beautiful thing to be able to walk away from something as life altering, literally, right? Like you looked death in the face, and to come away. How many years has it been? You said 2017?
Yeah, it's been 6 years.
Yeah. To have the self-awareness and the ability to kind of look at it that way. I'm intrigued and pulled into the way that you chose to write it to your. How many kids did you have at that point?
At that time, my wife was just pregnant with my son. He was my first kid. Yeah, for some reason, when I was writing my journal in Iraq and in Syria, I wrote it to my children, my future children. And when I was in Iraq, I didn't even know I was going to have children. It was just.
You still did it?
Yeah, I still did it. So my hope is to turn my journal into a book someday for my kids.
That's powerful, especially to have the perspective being, you talk about their mom, you talk about and your wife, and it's honest and raw in a way that I think is going to be very compelling for our kids when they listen. And we have a little bit of an audience that's even beyond the kids. Mm-hmm. Did you always have that point of view, like from the very beginning?
You mean for writing it to my children, or just the
like did it start that way and it just stayed that way?
At first, no. I just started writing because I found myself in the Middle East, and I thought that I should capture some of those experiences. And when I look back, I'm so glad that I did. And about halfway through, the way it all started was that I was humbled by one of my younger friends who was on my sniper team with me. He called me out in a big way, and it really made me think about my life, and that's really why I started to go back and start writing. And when I did, man, it just opened this whole world to me. And I loved it. I loved writing. I loved talking about my experiences, but only in this journaling form. And I recalled a lot. And I don't think people do that very often, where they really just sit down and think about their lives, kind of just like a year by year, month by month kind of history of their lives and how they got to where they're at this moment. And that was a really cool experience for me to do that. So I have hundreds of pages written down of just my recollection of how I had gotten to that point in my life, to where he called me out and made me think that much. And so that was pretty cool. So at that point, once I had written all that, I was like, this could be some useful information for my kids someday, to see the experience that I've had and how I've learned from it and how I've grown from it.
Is the call out story, is that
That's
something
the
you
very
can,
beginning of my book, yeah.
can you tell a little bit of it, or are you not prepared or willing? And I don't mean that willing in a bad way, just are you able right now to kind of briefly tell us? Or
Yeah, it wasn't, it really wasn't, it wasn't a whole lot. It just hit me hard. So he was young and he was brilliant, and he knew it, and he was kind of an underachiever for how smart he was. And so at about halfway through deployment, we had just kind of grown tired of each other and just throwing jabs at each other. And I called him, some names, and he called me some names. But what really hurt me was that he told me that he thought I was a war dodger, and that I had gone to college specifically to not get into the Iraq-Afghan war. And it kind of hurt. Up until that point, I had never really thought about it. But these guys were 10 years younger than me.
and he's saying that to you in a combat zone.
Yeah.
Which seems incredibly ironic. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't as kinetic. See, when I was in Iraq, we were fighting against ISIS. We had missiles and stuff incoming to our base, but we didn't really do a whole lot over
Gotcha.
there. And so I think everyone was kind of feeling a little bit irrelevant. And in order to make yourself feel a little relevant, you have to put other people down. So we did that pretty often.
Like you did that among your guys?
Yeah.
It's trying to explain to somebody the camaraderie of the military who hasn't felt that camaraderie, and I'm not trying to make it special. But it's really ironic that happens within that camaraderie, within that sort of brotherhood or whatever you want to call it. I'm compelled I was a little bit entranced by those readings. And there's a lot of questions I think people are going to have, but I feel a little sense of responsibility to ask some of them. But also it's a lot to process, right? Yeah,
it is. It was it is a experience that most people don't have. And something like that where your life is threatened, it causes a paradigm shift in your life to where you just think about things differently.
Yes.
Like since I came back from that first deployment, I can probably count on maybe two hands how many sports events I've watched, where my entire life was like dedicated to watching the Colts or the Indiana Hoosiers play basketball or something. Up until that point, my life was completely dedicated to sports. So when I came back from that deployment, just after having this different understanding of how the world works, and that anyone could be that close to death at any time. It's not that you don't really understand when it's going to happen. I just, stuff like that, it's not as important to me. Not that sports aren't important, but just to me, after that experience, it just changed my entire life.
What would you say to people who, toward the end there, you were talking about perspective, I think. In my opinion, you were talking about the guys that were on the helicopter that have a pity party every year, and how you choose not to do that, but you still want to remember because it offers, I think, some more perspective for you, or like a reflection, right?
Right.
What would you say to people, whether it's our kids who are listening or people outside of that, who, choose the pity party on a regular basis for whatever reason, whether it's attention or self-loathing or whatever, or because they, I won't presume to know, but as somebody who has gone through the things that you related, and then who intentionally chooses a different path than that, what would you say if somebody said, "Hey, man, like you went through this terrible thing. You should, take a minute to soak up the I don't even know if I'd call it negativity or just waller in it a little bit. Why not? I mean that as a,
sure.
of course, I think you're right to do it your way, but I'm just trying to.
Well, there's a lot of different ways to cope with things. In our society today, we glorify victimhood, and that's just not something that I'm willing to participate in. I think, I'm kind of like the pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of guy. And, quite frankly, if I was having a pity party when I was a kid, my dad would have told me to get over it. And that's just kind of the tough love that I grew up with. But my dad was a Marine, so I have that experience to grow up with him, who was tough on me, and I think that probably played a lot into it. So it's not just like as simple as, get over it, think about it from a different perspective. But to be honest, I don't really have a whole lot of advice for people who didn't grow up with a Marine father. That's just the way I grew up, and that's the way that I choose to approach situations that I'm in, where, there are ways of coping with things that are not as direct as what I do. I think that we have a lot more power within us, within our psyche, within our brains and our bodies to control a mental state, control our spiritual state, and I think that we have the power to overcome some of those feelings of victimization, or just I don't know, feeling anxiety and feeling depression and stuff like that over a situation like that. I think that we have a lot more power than what we are giving ourselves. And so that's kind of what I drew out of it was, and I had also at this point, I'd already gone through sniper school. I'd already gone through a lot of different situations where they had just drugged that kind of, if there was any hesitation inside me, it was gone at that point. So I didn't even have an opportunity to feel bad for myself.
Do you still, are you in contact with everybody from the helicopter experience?
Unfortunately not. My buddy Pilar, who I had mentioned in there, he was on my sniper team. We talk once a year, and that's right, at the anniversary of the crash, which happens to be right around both of our birthdays, so it kind of gives us an opportunity. But no, most of the guys I don't have any contact with. And to be honest, it was a big part of my life, but it was just another part of my life. And for a lot of people, it's probably the same thing. There are some stuff that come up around the time of the crash. Like, I have some psychological things happen to me right around that date every year. I think I've probably talked to you about this before, but it's stuff that, that's not on the surface. It's stuff that just pops up. It might be headaches, or it might be just something like my body would just feel this anxiety that just has happened before. It's just stuck inside me that just hasn't come out yet. So I think talking about it, writing about it, stuff like that kind of helps relieve some of that anxiety. So you can be as tough as you want, but your body's still saying, hey, man, there's some stress in here. You got to get it out. So talking about it helps. Writing about it certainly helps. Reading what I have written in the past. So those are also mechanisms to help. But, yeah, my body reminds me sometimes of it right around that date.
Yeah, I've heard a lot about, apparently there's a book called The Body Remembers, and it's about the psychological impact, or the physiological impact of psychological trauma. Don't quote me on that, but it's something in that neighborhood. Someone that I trust kind of recommended it for, when you read nonfiction and you find interesting things in the scientific kind of realm or whatever. So I'm a big believer in that too. And I've experienced that in different ways as well. I'm curious about, because the perspective is to your kids, do you have, like, in your mind now, you have hundreds of pages, which is fascinating. As you sit here today, do you see it as a memoir that you might try to publish, or is it just for your kids, or have you even thought about that?
I haven't. I've thought about it a lot here recently. I haven't, because I haven't, ashamedly, I haven't been journaling as much as I did when I was in the military. I did for about a year because things were just changing so rapidly in my life, leaving the military, starting teaching, starting to have kids, moving, losing family members, and just like, it has been a wild ride for the last 6 years of my life. And I haven't journaled as much, but I would like to get back into it and try to go through and just collect some memories and thoughts and write them down. I think if I ever do publish it would be for the intention of my children reading it, and maybe, just the community, like our local community. I would not want, I don't know, if I would feel kind of weird for my life to be just out there for everyone to examine and to pick apart. But
especially by today's standards, right?
Right.
Yeah. Has your wife read any or some fraction of it or all of it? Or
she has. And I'm a pretty straightforward dude, so I was candid in my approach to writing it. I didn't really hold anything back, and I was pretty hard on myself, but in a way that I could spin it positively for my kids. The standards that I hold, that I try to hold them to, there's a reason for it, and so there's kind of I draw a pretty hard distinction on what I should have been doing compared to what I did, where I kind of write it. I tell the story, hey, this is what happened in my past, and then there's like a little paragraph or two explaining, maybe what I should have done, what I learned from it, or where we can draw wisdom from that would say you should do this in this kind of situation.
That's a powerful narrative from a father to his kids.
I hope so.
Yeah.
The goal originally was to give it to my son at like graduation time, kind of, when he's approaching manhood. But he might need to hear it before that. Now that I've been around him for five years, he might need to hear some of these stories.
He might need to listen to this podcast when he's 12 and 13, and you say when he's 5.
Yeah. Right.
Do you have any thoughts about why now in the podcast?
As far as why tell this story, you mean?
Yeah, or was it just because it was close to the anniversary? And I remember seeing you in the hallway the other day and you saying, hey, Swank, I'm coming up on the anniversary of my helicopter crash, and I think I want to do something. Was it just spur of the moment, or is this a little intentional? Well,
I mean, it was intentional to the degree that I wanted to give some just kind of like anecdotal story about my life and how the perspective kind of thing that we talked about. And, it's good, I think, that our listeners, I've had some positive feedback from them, and they want to hear more about our military experience. And I think this is just a good way for me to share that and, share it in real time like that. All of that stuff that I wrote there was my experience I wrote that from Syria.
Yeah.
Like I wrote that the next day.
Right.
So that's about as real as it gets, I think.
It is. Yeah.
And so I'm blessed that I was able to capture that. And I don't know why I started writing it, to be honest. I just did, as far as the journaling goes. But like I said, the book part of it really kicked off when my buddy kicked me in the teeth with those words. But so I'm hoping that I can at least use some of these. Maybe I'll read some more journal entries. I have some pretty fun ones that I could read.
It would be a great way the kids could communicate going forward with the podcast and just request, like I've got a few journals from way back.
Yeah, that could be cool.
Mm-hmm. We'll have to see how it lands.
Yeah. Do you want me to try to read my second one and see if that it's pretty short, so we could add it in, or we could just.
I think that I think we leave this part of the conversation absolutely no cut here, because if you're going to say to me, do you think I should read more? My answer is going to be yes. And if I were to say no, like if I'm listening to this, to be honest, I'm like, no, yes, you should read more. Yes.
Well, I mean, I have pages and pages of.
Right, but you had another one kind of prepared, right?
I did, yes. Now, I will say I did not read it all the way through to make sure that I don't have any kind of cursing or anything.
I think I can be pretty handy with the editing.
We could probably make mention that this was written from the perspective of a Marine who was in combat, and that some of the language that was used here is not, something that I choose to use with my students or with my children. I'll read another one. It's pretty short. If it's too gritty, let me know. We'll cut it out. 10/13/2017, Friday, Spokane, South. Today is my 31st birthday. It also happens to be Friday the 13th. I woke up from my usual 6 a.m. rover duty to an intelligence report that ISIS was going to attack. I woke everyone up to stand to. I laid in the prone position for about 2.5 hours with Donnie and Pilar looking for anything to pop off. It was strange thinking as my reticle would land on the head of a passerby or a farmer or a kid or a goat, for that matter, that they have no idea that I could end their life just by moving my finger. Not that I was thinking of murder, but these ISIS bastards hide amongst the locals to blend in. They use civilians as shields. They hide behind the innocent. You cannot discount or gloss over anyone or anything out here. There's been 3 VBIDs, that's vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices, in the past 6 days targeting our partner forces and the SDF and the refugees within a fairly close proximity to here. Yesterday, they drove into a big crowd of refugees and blew up the vehicle, causing a mass casualty. The report hasn't been given yet how many died. A few days ago, there was a meeting between ISIS and SDF to exchange the bodies of the dead, but during that exchange, ISIS blew up another vehicle, killing multiple people. They have no morals, and they are truly wicked people. Yesterday, a truck parked outside of our perimeter, and 2 guys in strange uniform began walking towards Donnie and Steve's post. I grabbed my SAS and got in a good position to drop them, my crosshairs between their eyes until they turned around and drove away. I'm sure they were just testing us. Looking in a man's eyes like that is pretty wild. You can really develop a sense of their intentions. It's like a window to someone's soul. Some of these men here are filled with pure wickedness and absolute evil, and their eyes are as black as night. It's truly like they are possessed by demons. I hope that you never have to see this sort of evil and hatred. One of our platoon's traditions is to beat the crap out of the birthday boy. We call it the birthday beatdown. At some point today, these fools will try to catch me off guard, dogpile me, and try to give me my lickings. It's harmless and it's fun, and you don't really feel it in the moment because you're trying your best to hold your ground. Afterwards, they all give you a bro hug and say happy birthday. I love this tradition. Some people in this society think it's barbaric, maybe machismo. It's hard to explain the camaraderie that's felt when some of the toughest warriors in the world are aggressively and savagely beating you up for fun. I'll tell you, I don't remember hardly any of my birthday cakes over the years or all of my gifts I've received, but I remember those beatdowns.
Yeah, we're definitely keeping that one.
All right. Did you think it was too much?
No.
Okay.
No. I think it's going to cause a lot of thinking.
Yeah.
And reflecting. And sure, and this is just my own initial thoughts. I think people are going to have thoughts on whether, they're going to have thoughts about your experience, but then I think they're going to think about their own experience too, which may be what you're kind of hoping for in some tangential way.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to share these to make people feel any sort of way towards me or to like boost my own self ego or anything like that. And I don't want people to get that feeling, but I do share these to just like, I wanted to kind of capture there that it was my birthday, and the fact that, a normal person's birthday happens in a specific way and, they celebrate and do these things. But in that case, it was different.
Yeah.
Right. On my birthday, I almost had to kill people.
Yeah. No, I was gonna ask you because we've presented these, and you've kind of presented these as 2 different things, but I see quite a thread that runs through them. They both kind of life hangs in the balance in both of them. On one side, you have no, at least for some of it, you have no power to, right. You are just experiencing, and you have you have to deal with the effects of the fact that you just are experiencing this traumatic thing and the thoughts that come from that, right? The helicopter's going down, and there's nothing you can do to stop it from going down.
Right. That was 2 weeks before this experience, yeah.
Right. And then 2 weeks later, it's your birthday, and you're putting crosshairs on foreheads and knowing that it's a simple movement of your finger.
Right.
And how that's
like
not...
how much control you have.
Yes. Which I find fascinating and also deeply powerful. Like, these reflections are thought-provoking in a way that is, I think it's going to stick with people, and it's going to make them think. It certainly has me.
I hope it does. I hope that people who listen to this just at least take an approach of just, being open-minded and trying to apply some of these principles to their own lives, and just understanding that the world that we live in here in this country is just, it's so, we're so free compared to everyone else in the entire world. We have so much autonomy, and we can just do whatever we want, whenever we want. And these other countries it's not a thing.
Yeah.
It's not a thing at all. And the evil that you see in these countries that I was talking about, it was moving. It was powerful to see the evil that was in some of these guys' eyes. That, I touched on it in there, but I don't really talk about it much because it was weird. Like, it was truly like walking demons.
And that's largely because of hate, you know, and misunderstandings and hate and the way people are raised when you have two cultures or three cultures or different cultures that are from a different type of experience, like a shame culture versus a guilt culture. And like when you just perpetrate hate, it makes for dark eyes and emptiness and the pursuit of the death of others.
Yeah.
And there's a lot there.
We're on almost 40 minutes.
I knew it was going to be a lot.
Yeah. How do you want to end this thing? How do you want to wrap it up? You're going to have a lot to cut on this thing. You're going to have to listen to it.
I always do, though.
Okay.
Like, I have to listen to every second.
Yeah.
In a good way, though. So there was something else I was going to bring up, and I forgot it there for a second. And we can still cut it out if you want, but I found our interaction on Veterans Day to be interesting. In the hallway.
Okay.
So you had missed our faculty meeting, and I had gone in the back room of the library while everyone else, they had started the meeting, but I was looking for something in the back room and I didn't realize the meeting had started. Yeah. And I come out and I hear, where's Mrs. Swank? And I'm like, oh, I thought maybe somebody needed something. And I'm like, oh, I'm right here. And I have my hand like up, waving. And they're like, all of a sudden everybody turns around and starts clapping, and then they're standing up. And I was so uncomfortable.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like really, really uncomfortable. And then later I saw you in the hallway because I even said out loud while they're clapping, "Where's Mentz?" Like, because I wanted the attention to go away from me. And then I see you in the hallway, and I don't know if you remember, but I like punched you.
Yeah.
In the chest. Like, where were you? I was by myself taking all the uncomfortable Veterans Day praise, and I don't want it to come off like I'm unthankful for it or whatever. I guess right. I just and our interaction in the hallway was really funny because you were like, yes, I hate missing that. One of those kind of like, haha, you had to be there. Yeah. By yourself.
No, I got it back though, because I went to the junior high, and they put on a really good program, and kudos to them for that. But I was, there were I think five or so veterans who were there. Some of them shared their testimonies or their experience, and I did not have to, but they had some standing ovations there, and the entire school was there, and we were sitting down, and I was just, there was so many students who were just like clapping and looking at me and standing over top of me. It was a little bit awkward, but the cool thing is, and my buddy, I took off that day. It was the Marine Corps birthday, and I took off that day to go meet up with one of my Marine buddies who happened to be up in Ohio. And I was kind of sharing that experience with him, that it was a little bit uncomfortable, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it at the time. And he's still in, and he shared with me the perspective that at least we live in a country that honors our veterans the way that it does, and that was pretty powerful. A lot of countries don't; they don't care. It's just part of life, like in Israel, right?
Yeah, it's mandatory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
at least
past,
I think it's mandatory.
Yeah, from what I understand.
Yeah.
Or in the past, the draft and all that stuff where it wasn't volunteer. But and I was very impressed with the behavior of the students at the junior high. Everyone was very respectful, and I hope that the high school students would have the same respect for the veterans, and I think that they would.
I think they would.
And so that's just a commonality that we have in this country, where people just respect veterans, and I think that's a good thing. For myself, I want to see that kind of lifestyle, that kind of vocation, that kind of, I guess you could say, heroism be honored above the things that normally get glorified. So That's the 1 or 2 days a year when they're actually honoring veterans. That, it makes me proud to be not just a veteran, but an American. I don't always have that. I don't always feel that perspective, and so that was good.
Yeah, and also, I think Greensburg particularly is very good at this community and the school, the county. I think Indiana in general is pretty good, but particularly this community is very good at honoring veterans and respecting just kind of the tradition of things. And I know that people can get very, they can criticize that in some ways for like doing things the way it's always been done or whatever, but I don't really mean it in that context. I've always been a little bit taken aback by how much attention veterans get here. I mean, you and I wear the cords at graduation, the subtle ways that comes up hits me harder than the overt ways. It's just my personality. It's not a commentary on the overt ways in any capacity. But I think another thing that probably should be mentioned is, in my experience of people who have been in the military, very, very few of them are like chest beating, like, yeah, look at me, I've been like, honor me, egocentric kind of folks. There's a few, but at least in our building, the 4 veterans that are present in our building, I don't think any of the 4 of us really call too much attention to it.
No.
And that's my experience of most vets. They're just kind of quiet about whether they have combat experience or not or whatever. You get the occasional ego-centered kind of person, but it's a quiet kind of thing.
Yeah, silent professionals.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the guys in my MOS, 0317 Scout Sniper, they would probably listen to this and say, man, what a sellout. He's talking about his service.
Right.
He's not being a quiet professional. But to me, I think that's kind of a backwards way of thinking in terms of, what we're doing here and who we're sharing with and trying to inspire them. So that's all for today. Remember, if you're a student at GCHS, email us a question. Yours might be next.
Thanks for listening.